Hello, everyone. I'm just going to give you a big old welcome as you're coming in. Very pleased that you can join us for our webinar today. My name is Susan Weinstein. I'm co-executive director at Families for Depression Awareness, and I am honored to greet you and bring you into our session on how parents can prepare college-bound teens for mental wellness. I'm really glad that we were able to put this webinar together. As something we've been talking about for a long time. This is an age group that we know has, a lot of things going on for them, and we want to be able to help caregivers support their kids as best we can. So, welcome. Today we're expecting our webinar to last for about 90 minutes, but if you need to step away, don't worry about it. We are recording, and we'll have it available for viewing on YouTube, maybe tomorrow, but within 3 business days. We're going to send out the link to everybody who's registered, so you needn't worry about having access to it. You can also go to our YouTube channel, FFDA1, and you'll find it there. And actually, while you're there, just go ahead and click subscribe, and that'll keep you up to date on all of our family videos and expert interviews and webinars and live streams and all the things that we post there. You may see now that there's a poll up for your participation. The question is, how confident are you in supporting your teen's mental health at college? And your choices are very confident, confident, somewhat confident, slightly confident, and not confident. So, give that a moment's thought, and I'll just continue while you're putting in your vote here. During the webinar, please feel free to use the chat. It'll be open for you to communicate with FFDA staff and with each other. Keep an eye on it because we'll be providing some useful links and the materials through the chat. You'll find the link for the slides to the presentation as well. Just a caution that you probably know by now, but please don't share any information in the chat that you don't want to be public. It's not meant to be a place for you to be talking about your kids' diagnoses or things like that. So that's the caution that I want to have for you. If you have a question that you want to be answered by our presenter or by me, please use the question and answer, the Q&A, instead of putting in the chat, because I probably won't see it. One thing that we are grateful for is all of the people who submitted questions when they registered. That makes us cognizant of whether we're hitting the points that you're looking for. So a lot of them are actually answered in the presentation, but we have a list of ones that we will get to when we're in the question and answer period. If you didn't have a chance to submit yours, then please feel free to use the Q&A. So we're already working on a poll. I'm going to go ahead and maybe advance to the next slide and tell you just a little bit about Families for Depression Awareness. Since 2001, Families for Depression Awareness has worked to eliminate the stigma of depression and educate caregivers about how to support their loved ones who are living with mood disorders. As you can see, our mission is that we help families recognize and cope with depression and bipolar disorder to get people well and prevent suicides. With our focus on education, family support, and getting help, we take an upstream approach to suicide prevention. Simply put, our view is people who get diagnosed and treated are less likely to attempt suicide. It's our hope, of course, to put the crisis lines out of business, but we know that they will always be there to serve a very important purpose. Mood disorders do affect the whole family, so that, if one person is the, person who's living with depression, it does have an impact on everybody else. It may be, extra work that the spouse needs to pick up, or, just the emotional toll that it might take on everybody. So we want everybody to have their needs identified and addressed. And finally, we believe that caregivers are an essential part of suicide prevention. To us, they're among the first to notice signs of a problem. They're highly motivated to do something to help their loved one, and they're often positioned to marshal the resources to get their loved one the care they need. Caregivers can count on FFDA to provide education, strategies, and inspiration, along with reminders to take care of themselves too. Perhaps I'll go ahead and end the poll. And that is that we are finding that the great number of you are somewhat confident, almost 3/4. That's a great starting place. It means that you're not, feeling like you have nothing in your toolbox already, but that there's still room to grow. We've got about 8% who are looking at very confident, 13% at confident, and 8% at slightly confident. So really a great starting place. Where are we? So our website is at familyaware.org. If you registered, you probably already know that. But you'll find a wealth of information for supporting people with depression or bipolar disorder. In addition to informative articles, you'll find family stories, expert interviews, videos, and a lot more. You can take a depression and bipolar disorder screening test. You can create a mental health family tree. You can take a stress test that does more than just tell you that you're stressed. It does give you a rating and points you to some helpful resources for you. Also, I'd suggest that you check out the blog under resources, and you'll find multiple posts and videos that are related to the webinar content that we're covering tonight, including family stories and some personal views from younger people, and some tips for caregivers as well. One other thing that you'll find is that we have a whole host of webinars. We've been doing webinars since 2010. We are not part of the pandemic bandwagon. We've been doing this for a long time, and we've been building out our webinar library. We have a variety of topics. We often recommend to people that they start with the Understanding Teen Depression webinar, just to make sure that they've got the terminology and the same foundational information. But then there's a whole variety of youth and young adult kind of programming that we have, as well as adults and health insurance and tips for caregivers, like setting boundaries and communication strategies, things like that. So those are some of our more recent ones, but I do encourage you to take a look at all of them. And also, please feel free to be in touch with us and tell us what kinds of topics you're looking for in the future. When you do your survey, you'll have the chance to do that too. All right, so for our program today, we're going to be talking a lot about this time away approach, which is the approach that they have at Duke University. And we're also hoping that it will provide some strategies for caregivers and for students as they're navigating their own schools. We'll talk about key practices there, resources, college student mental wellness, impactful strategies, and we'll get to the questions and answers. And I will, once again, probably for the third or fourth time, ask you to please take the survey that we're offering. One of the things that I wanted to do is to give us a little context, and that is, college is a great time for a lot of kids. It's an exciting time. I mean, if this is their first time going off to school, then they're probably having a variety of emotions, as are you. But it's a whole huge shift in the way that these young people operate. They're left on their own a lot more. They have to make their own decisions. They've got a schedule that's more flexible. They have places that they need to be. They don't necessarily have the kinds of parental encouragement or, whatever, getting them out the door, or, right there to answer questions or make their breakfast or whatever it happens to be. So they have this independence, but it can cut both ways. And for most kids, there's a pretty steep curve on what's expected of them academically. So there are a whole lot of potential stressors out there. A teen or young adult who's off to school may already have a diagnosed mental health condition, but they may not. They may already have, a treatment plan or, some strategies for managing their stress, and they may not. They may already have these, and they may not have the wherewithal to implement them while they're gone. So it's also a time when mental health conditions emerge. So this is a time when bipolar disorder can manifest, perhaps for the first time, particularly as it shows to be bipolar disorder, because they may have already had depressive state. So this is the environment that these kids are working in. And these are things that may be concerns for you. And we have somebody here who can really talk us through a lot of this stuff and ways that you can support your kids going through this time. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Kimberly Blackshear. And she is our featured presenter. She is director of the Time Away Office, co-located in the Duke University Office of Undergraduate Education and Student Affairs. In this role, Kimberly supports all undergraduates before and while they are taking time away from the university and then helps them transition back. Kimberly served for 8 years as a network liaison and affiliate program coordinator for the National Center for Child Traumatic Stress, which is a bicoastal SAMHSA grant at both Duke University and the University of California at Los Angeles. Kimberly served as the clinical advisor and quality improvement coordinator for a day treatment facility, serving children long-term suspended or expelled from public school system. She's been a probation officer, child protective specialist, and director of a community mental health agency. For the last 15 years, Kimberly has served as a court-appointed guardian ad litem in the state of North Carolina, representing the best interests of children in the child welfare system. In addition to her work in child serving and educational systems, Kimberly is the executive director of a forensic psychology practice in Durham, where she also serves as a mitigation specialist on capital murder cases across the state. Kimberly obtained her Bachelor of Science degree in psychology, sociology, and criminal justice from Urbana University, and her Master of Social Work degree specializing in clinical social work from Fordham University. I am so thrilled to have you here, Kimberly, and I will turn the program over to you.
All right. Thank you so much. So I think we're going to do a poll. Let's start with a poll. And so if your child needed to take some time away from school, how supportive do you think you would be with this idea? Do you think, yes, I would be supportive, no, undecided, or maybe I need to learn a little bit more? Let's give you a few minutes to give some feedback on this. And there's no right or wrong answer. This is just where you are right now in this moment. All right. So I'm so glad to see so many people say yes. That's wonderful. Undecided, a lot of things would go into that, right? And not knowing really what we need, and then also wanting to learn more. This sets us up nicely for the rest of the webinar. So let's kind of dig in here. I use this phrase time away approach, and I want to make sure that I kind of expel this out a little bit. In doing this work, I've worked at Duke for 13 years now. I live in faculty and residence housing. I live with 250 first-year students. So I have a pretty firm understanding of what college life is now. And it's very different than when I was in college. But I want to make sure that I explain when I'm saying time away what this term means. When I'm saying time away, it means a change in status with the university. So this could mean a personal leave, a medical leave, an academic dismissal, a disciplinary dismissal, an administrative withdrawal, a voluntary withdrawal. What we've learned is that it's really important for us to label it as an umbrella, as a time away, rather than getting into digging into the leave types. When we really work into the leave types, this is where we stigmatize leaves. So I've been working with a big collaboration of universities across the country where we're really working to shift our language. So we're using a phrase similar to time away. And so then allowing students to take whatever leave type that they need, but allowing us to have this general phrase as our terminology. We're hoping that by using a general phrase like time away, that we will empower students to take the time that they need for whatever reason that they need. That we want students to be able to individualize their education path, and recognizing that a linear path is not always going to work for everyone. It also, may not be in someone's best interest to kind of keep pushing forward. But taking a time away or taking a break can be really beneficial for students for a lot of ways. So When we're talking in general around the time away approach, what we've done at Duke and what a lot of universities are working towards across the country is looking at an approach that is supportive to all students. And so when I say all students, meaning that it doesn't matter if you take a time away for a medical leave or if you are forced to take a time away for an academic dismissal, making sure that the university is there to provide the same level of support, care, and guidance for the students. Because typically what happens with an academic dismissal is there's usually some undertreated or untreated, stuff going on that really needs to be addressed. And when we are putting everything under a time away approach, then we're able to really work through that. We're really working to decrease that stigma, as I mentioned before. What we've seen is providing consistent, ongoing support for students is really beneficial. And so making sure we work really hard to provide service when a student is deciding whether or not to take a time away, during their time away, and then we are also there in their transition back. We also make sure that there's consistent documentation, that we work hard to remove administrative burden in the time away process. Making that decision about a time away is hard, but the process should be easy. And so working really hard with universities across the country to work to streamline their process as well. And then the time away approach here at Duke is also led by a clinician. So that way, each one of those conversations has an understanding about mental health and supportive of them and their families through the process. So as we're continuing kind of talking about the time away approach, none of this is probably going to be too surprising to you. These are kind of the four principles. We have to be transparent. We have to be really clear with students about the time away process and how it will impact them. We talk about how will this impact scholarships? How will this impact housing? How will this impact financial aid? How will it impact their roommates? Lots of students are so sweet where they're like, I want to take a time away, but I don't want to put a burden on my roommate and trying to find another roommate. And that's so kind. But you've got to prioritize you, right? And so we want to make sure that we give them the ability to kind of talk through those things before they make their decision. So they'll feel better about their decision and then can kind of go through that. So transparency is really key. I treat each one of these students that I'm working with and the students who contact me from different schools all over the country, same way I would want someone to treat my child. And I've got 6 children. 2 of them have already gone through college things. So I know that fear of dropping your child off of college and wanting to make sure that someone's going to help them. So having that honest, upfront communication, key. And really being transparent so they can make an informed decision, because we are an education institution and education happens beyond in the classroom. And these conversations are an opportunity for education as well. And so being clear with them so then they can get good information and make an informed decision, and we'll support them whichever decision they decide to make. The time away approach here is making sure that we're consistent. We need to be consistent with policies, but we have an individualized approach for each student. So what does that mean? At Duke, there are timelines of when you request a medical leave and when you request a personal leave and all of those things. There are policy requirements for meeting, what we call continuation, or being able to continue on to the next semester based on your academic performance. We have to make sure that we're consistent with those policies for all students, but we recognize that different students have different challenges, and making sure that we approach those students with their individual needs. Our policies have to be really clear and spelled out. They need to be spelled out for the students. They need to be spelled out for you as parents. So that way, you know them and or can find them and help the students, again, make informed decisions. And then, the approach is also, again, like I can't say this enough about destigmatizing the approach. We really want students to have the opportunity to really be engaged in their education, not treating it like a checklist of, I'm doing all of these requirements that I have to do to get this degree. But we really want to make sure that our classrooms are full of students that are engaged and want to participate in their education and that feel healthy and well in doing that. And so by destigmatizing the time away approach, or the time away process, then what we're going to do is when students need to take their time away, then they're going to be able to step away, right? And that's really what we want. So, what we work on is really a relational model. Is we want to make sure that we're meeting students where they are, and we're meeting them holistically. So when we're talking to students, we're not just talking about what your graduation requirements are. We're talking about their personal goals, their professional goals. We're talking about their hobbies, their passion areas. We're talking about all of those things. And we're helping students come up with an individualized plan that works and meets their needs. That's really like where the social work comes from, and having someone with a social work background, why it's so important is that we've got to meet students where they are. If a student is in crisis, then we've got to make sure that we're responding timely in that crisis and making sure that they have the resources that are available. Sometimes when students are in crisis, then everybody jumps in, and then it can be even more overwhelming to the student. And so usually this is when the time away office takes the lead and allows space for the student to identify what they need in that moment and then work through that. What we found is that with this relational model, it's beneficial to everyone. It's beneficial to the university and to the institution because we are able to be very clear, honest, and upfront with our students. If we're meeting our students where we are, we're showing them that we are engaged with them, that we want them to be, part of our process. And then also, if we're engaged with our students throughout their time away, then we're showing our buy-in and our support for them. And we are there, arms wide open, when it's time for them to come back, not forcing them to try to navigate a return process on their own, which means when a student comes back, they're going to feel more supported. I know who's working with me. I've been able to stay in contact with them. I know what's going on in my university. So I don't feel like I've just been walking back in after a year and I don't have that touch point. So this is where that model is really important because it touches into human to human, right? How can I support you? How can I help you? And that we really want to partner with the students in this process, not I'm leading you, but I'm partnering with you. So in doing this, these are kind of the support services that we offer. Obviously, one-on-one conversations about treatments, about academic options, making sure that they, have what they need, and again, allowing them to lead those conversations and listening to them. We also recognize that, a university is a bunch of a collection of systems, and it can be overwhelming. It can absolutely be overwhelming. So providing assistance with navigating all of the university systems is really a key service. Assisting students through the time away process, which includes communicating with faculty, notifying them about the move out process, how to set up services off campus or back home, talking about visa services. If a student is in crisis, trying to manage all of that is so much. And oftentimes students will say, this is too much for me to navigate. I'm just going to stay. And so really want to make sure that that we have people in place. And we'll talk a little bit later, but there are places at your children's school that you can call upon and get support in these areas. We really work hard for students to develop an individualized time away plan that will outline prioritizing their health, prioritizing engagement with, career services or volunteer opportunities. We'll get more into what a time away plan is a little bit later. Having regular check-ins with students is really important. It's, as you know, it's an opportunity to build a connection, a relationship, anchoring the student to someone within the institution. Something that we offer at Duke is we offer meditation and mindfulness classes. We have an intervention called KORU. It's K-O-R-U. It was an intervention that was developed by a psychiatrist here at Duke for college students to manage stress, anxiety, to improve sleep. It's a really great intervention. They actually have an app that you can download with guided meditations. I think there's a cost associated. I think it's like $3.99, and it's yours forever. And it has a meditation guide in it, and it keeps daily logs, and it's really great. But this intervention is just 1 hour for 4 weeks. And you learn 9 different meditation strategies. And so it can be really helpful for students in thinking about meditation differently than, kind of what is projected in the media, where we, kind of sit quiet and still and not move, where we're talking about meditations that you can do lying down that will help with sleep, meditations that will help give you energy in just 30 seconds, and meditations that you can use before you take a test to help you focus. So a lot of different really great strategies geared towards this population. And there's an accompanied book that goes with it called the 20-something Meditation Guide that was also written by Dr. Rogers. That's really helpful and a quick read. We also provide support in the return process, and then also through welcome back events. And the welcome back events have been quite amazing, because what they've done is, because we're using that umbrella term again as time away, we come together and have lunch, and students don't get into the specific details of why they took their time away, but they're connecting with other students that had similar experiences. And so it has been really great and created a nice opportunity for community. So let's talk about resources and resources that should be available at the universities at your school. So most schools have case management, or sometimes it's called higher education case management services. And what they do is they offer the ability to help students navigate services and navigate systems within their institution. It also will help them connect with support services off campus. Usually these services are housed within student affairs, usually somewhere within the dean of students reporting system, and they can be a great resource. A lot of them also have the ability for check-in requests that can come from parents. A lot of them have online reporting systems where you can submit, a check-in request on your child. Say, Jimmy and I have scheduled to, meet on Sunday evenings and have a phone call. I haven't heard from Jimmy in 3 weeks. I've only been getting minimal one-word text messages once a week. Can somebody come and check in on him? And so submitting that report will trigger the university to say, hey, we need to come, and maybe we need to shoot him an email. Maybe we need to text him. Maybe we need to knock on his door and check and see how Jimmy's doing. Most universities will integrate the case management services with the housing and residential life staff. So an RA can come and check on your student and make it seem seamless. Hey, we're having this event tonight in the dining hall. We're bringing milkshakes in from Cookout. just checking in. You coming tonight? Oh, no, I'm not coming. Is everything okay? No, I just, failed my math test. I'm really upset. So it can seem like a really natural and easy, easy check-in. So I would really suggest you, if you haven't spent any time on the student affairs website of your child's school, to go ahead and do that and look and see. They may have cute names for the case management. Sometimes it's the care team, it's the, student success team, but really it's case management. And so you may want to just know that and how they handle that. Most schools have counseling services where they offer therapy services on campus. Some of the universities offer psychiatry services. Usually these universities offer what's called a brief or acute intervention counseling, which means that a maximum of maybe 6 sessions. What they usually do will meet with students, learn a little bit about them, and then help them connect, if they need a longer term provider, with someone in the community that would be able to keep them throughout their time in college. There's usually a referral coordinator where this is what they specialize. They hold events, getting to know community providers that understand your university, that understand the pressures and the stress that students go through, and then also that will prioritize getting those students. Going through the counseling service and getting referrals is going to be much easier than trying to do it yourself through Psychology Today. There's also another resource called MyResource, miresource.com. It was actually a student who created this, who needed counseling services, where she was able to create a referral service for college students. And so some universities participate in that, and that may be a nice additional resource for you. Student health is also another resource. A lot of student health offices, they'll provide medication management if it is, pretty low clinical doses of medications, and they can be another really great resource for connecting with psychiatry or other support services that are available off campus. I really love the fact that universities across the country are developing wellness centers that offer holistic support. Our center offers paint night and community tea, where we have a grad student come and they make tea, and then they talk about the physical properties of the tea that make it good for your body. And then they all drink tea together. It's very sweet. We do drum circles. We do yoga. We do meditation groups. If this isn't available on your campus, I'm sure there are some great opportunities in the community. A lot of schools have also shifted in providing more peer supports, and we'll talk a little bit more about them, but in another slide, but there are some really great peer supports. The next one, and I really want to hit this hard, is the student disability and accommodation services. Navigating this in college can be really difficult. Every school has to have an access or disability services office. Again, most of them have different names or cute names, but this is essentially what they do, where their job is to meet the needs of the students. Now, of course, there has to be documentation in order to do that. Some schools make it easy where they provide a document for providers to fill out. That's kind of a checklist. Other schools will not provide a list, but require a letter on letterhead for the provider to spell out exactly what accommodations they need. My advice to you as one parent to another, tell your child's provider, and you're with your child there, of course, exactly what you guys need, right? So that way they can put it in place. Why we want to make sure that students go through the access office for accommodations and not go directly to their faculty is when students register with the access office, those accommodations are protected by law. If the student goes directly to the faculty, it's more of a favor, and the faculty cannot be held accountable if they don't follow them. So we've got to make sure that students register. So that way those needs are documented, and that way the faculty are held accountable to following those. I'm a faculty member myself at Duke and teach a class. And so if a student in my class is registered with, what we call SDAO, the Student Disability and Access Office, then I get a letter that says, hey, Kimberly, Jane Doe is in your class and she has these 5 accommodations. And so your job is to meet those. If you don't think you can meet those in your class setup, then you need to meet with us before the semester starts so we can talk about how you can make shifts and changes in your classroom. It doesn't tell me the students' diagnoses because that's not my business as a faculty member, but it does tell me the accommodation. And if I don't understand that accommodation or how it fits in my classroom, it gives me support on how I can make that shift or change. It's really an underrated service. And ultimately, it is meant to be an ongoing, continual conversation between your student and that office and faculty throughout their graduation each semester, because as their needs shift, then their accommodations may shift. What I like to think about disability accommodations is I like to think about disability accommodations as an umbrella. When do you purchase an umbrella? You purchase an umbrella when it is bright and sunny and beautiful outside. You do not purchase an umbrella when it is a thunderstorm or a hurricane outside, because you have to weather the storm to get into the store. Just like owning an umbrella, it does not mean that you are required to use it. If you want to play out in the rain, you certainly can. Just because you own an umbrella doesn't mean you have to use it. Just because you get accommodations doesn't mean you have to use it. Some students will feel like, I don't need the accommodations in my art classes. I only need them in math. So I'm not going to register. How about we register, use them in math, don't use them in art, and that's okay, right? What we know is the process can be difficult and it can take time. So we want to make sure that just like the umbrella, that we get them when we don't need them. So when we do, they're all ready and in place, right? So the next time a storm rolls through, I have an umbrella in my hand because I purchased it before and I can choose to use it or not. And so we want to do the same thing with our disability and access services. Next, we'll talk about emergency services. Every university has to have emergency services. We're really fortunate here where 100% of our police force are trained as CIT officers. We also have security. And then we also have an on-call system. And every school has to have an on-call system, but sometimes you have to dig deep into your student affairs website to find it. The on-call system is if you are concerned about your child, that you can call and then someone can check on them in that moment. So you want to make sure that you have that number so that way you know how to engage in that. The other thing that I want to talk about is tuition insurance. And this is one that not a lot of people know about. So tuition insurance is something that you can purchase before the start of the semester. And so I want to make sure that you hear that it has to be before the semester starts. And what it can do is there are a lot of different programs out there. Some schools will have a third-party vendor that they're working with for their tuition insurance, or you can find your own. We just started a new contract with a new program called Grad Guard. What I like about Grad Guard is it is a large insurance pool and everybody is paying into the same money across the country versus one school, one pot of funds, which means everybody's premiums are really high. With tuition insurance, what it does is if a student purchases tuition insurance for that semester, something comes up and they need to take a medical leave. The tuition insurance will reimburse the family back up to 100% of the tuition that they paid. And a lot of programs will allow you to shift the amount of your coverage based on the amount that you're contributing. So if your child's school is $40,000 a year and your parental contribution is $10,000 a year, then you can get insurance for that $10,000 that you cover. And then if your child needs to take a medical leave, then you would be able to get that money back. You know, some students are like, oh no, then you're planning for the worst. You know, it's like a prenuptial agreement, like, oh, you're planning for divorce. It is a peace of mind. And usually tuition insurance, I mean, you can get it for $40,000 worth of coverage. I think families are paying about $350 or $400. If you're coming out of pocket for $40,000 worth of tuition, that $400 may be worth it later on. But I would encourage you to look into it, to look into tuition insurance, and it's not a hard process to follow. You know, I can't say enough about off-campus treatment options, but I want you to think about your on-campus supports as helping you identify those in your community. As a parent and dropping your child off at school, it can feel really overwhelming if it's an area that you don't know well, and making sure that they're getting really quality, good care. Lean on these resources so they can help you establish those providers that will likely support your student throughout their time at their college, right? And providing that consistency. So I mentioned before we would kind of dig a little bit more into peer supports. So here are a few examples of peer supports that I'm seeing kind of across the country, and they all kind of have different names. The first one's called Peer for You, or it's really a peer-to-peer support. Most programs, the peer-to-peer support is trained by the counseling center. So making sure that students understand stress points, triggers, understanding, you know, when a student is in crisis and how to respond. So usually a lot of those programs get the training in that way. Their engagement is, you know, sometimes it's through like coffee chats or texts or podcasts. You know, we have some programs where students will kind of disclose some of the challenges that they've gone through in college and allow students to kind of self-select into groups based on, well, I'm experiencing the same thing where I'm having a hard time finding friends. And so I'm going to connect with this. We have other programs where we have where an entire dorm is assigned to a peer advisor. And the peer advisor will start off by having conversations about academics, but they leave the door open for general conversations. And then the other, and it's not on here, but the residential coordinator or the residential assistant, the RA, they are all trained well, and they can also be a really nice, and it feels to the student most of the time, a natural support. We also are seeing a lot of substance abuse support groups across campuses. And, you know, what we've seen is that not all youth respond to a 12-step model. And so a lot of the universities are using sobriety support groups. The group is confidential. They meet sometimes online, sometimes in person. It's a non-step model, but it is a peer model. These supports cannot be spoken about enough. They are so wonderful. I think that there's a narrative that is played out in the media and through old wives' tale that college is about partying and, you know, and unsafe decisions. And sobriety groups can be really helpful in grounding youth, that not everyone is doing that, and that's not for everyone, and that there is a place for you. And so, you know, what some schools have done is they will combine, if there are multiple schools around, they'll do a sobriety group for multiple schools. And so if you have a youth that has co-occurring mental health and substance abuse, I would really encourage you to do some research on sobriety groups and seen a lot of really great responses from these protocols.
I can jump in with this one if you'd like. We just wanted to throw in that there are resources that are available for kids regardless of their situation. And it's important for parents to be aware of them so that they can, gently nudge their kids. These are things that the kids can take care of themselves. They can make their own calls with something like the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. It's something that, or even the Trans Lifeline, either the person who is in crisis or someone with them can make the call. I actually think it's probably true for any of them. But the Trevor Project has 24/7 support for young LGBTQ people. The Trans Lifeline has support as well. The Crisis Text Line has become hugely popular with people of a certain age because they text probably better than they talk sometimes. And also it helps to not have to deal with like the emotion of your voice if you can just be texting. 988 offers both call or text to 988. Also, if you go to 988lifeline.org, they can chat online through that as well. The Not Okay is an app that when the kid programs in, the people who can help them, who are there like trusted adults. And if they need help, they press the button and it contacts those people. So those are just some resources we wanted y'all to be aware of. Okay, back to you.
All right. So we've talked about resources, we talked about that. But I think it's important for us to talk about like the signs of distress, right? And then we'll kind of walk through support and then some strategies that may be helpful for you as a parent. So these are kind of the signs of distress, right? Sleep issues, avoidance, health issues. I can't stress health issues enough. I can't tell you how many students I have where it's a cold and then the cold turns into a cold for 6 weeks. And then it turns into mono, and then it turns it like, and here recently, lots of issues with long COVID, which of course we don't have any data on. And so we're still kind of working through that. So definitely health issues. Social withdrawal, I used the example earlier where if you and your child haven't set up a regular communication routine, that would be a good support strategy to establish. But then you would be able to see some of those withdrawals, or if they're hard to engage. Decreased self-care, that may be turning one of those calls into FaceTime so you can kind of see, not just hear. Yeah, so these are the signs of distress that we want to make sure that you have on your radar when we're talking with our kids. I bring this slide up because I think it's really important. We have a lot of conversations, and I try not to roll my eyes, and I'll admit that, but where, people will say, oh, this generation is different, this generation is different. And I just want to say, like, different isn't bad. Different is not bad. What I love about youth right now, I love their comfortability talking about their health. I love it. When I was in school, and I can't even imagine what my parents were like. I mean, so many people were probably suffering, but they couldn't say it, right? And help seeking is way more common. And part of that is the work that you've been doing and helping them get connected and engaging them. I mean, based on our poll earlier, you're already saying, yes, I would support them taking a time away, right? So there's already engagement and support there. So I think that's really important to note. how it has been normalized to engage in those health-seeking behaviors. A lot of folks will say, well, the challenges right now is really connected to social media usage. There's also some positivity around social media too. It's not all sunshine and rainbows, but it's also not all doom and gloom. The apps that we talked about before, using this technology, we have turned something that could be negative into some positive opportunities as well, and opportunities to connect and learn and hear from others. There's also difference in our terminology and verbiage. We have now normalized clinical terms in our everyday language. Instead of saying, oh, this makes me sad, people are saying, oh, this makes me depressed. Or instead of saying, man, I'm a little nervous about tomorrow, and people say, I'm experiencing anxiety, right? So we have really normalized a lot of that language. I think it's important for all of us as parents to establish, what those terms mean to us and what those terms mean to our children. So when they say them, we understand, is this sadness or is this depression? Is this nervousness or is this anxiety? So I think it's really important for us to get that. And then the other thing, and again, I love this about this generation, is they expect results. They expect it. They're not just expecting someone to sit in a room with them and walk out and feel better. They want to feel supported. They want strategies that they can implement right now. Old school psychodynamic therapy is not going to work for most of these students, because they don't need to hear back and forth every word that they say. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? They want to know, dude, I am struggling here. Give me something that's going to work for me today, tomorrow. I need this. And this is great. It gives me so much hope for our future that our youth are putting it out there and are being direct and saying what they need and expecting people to follow through. So different is not bad. To me, different is wonderful and a breath of fresh air, to be honest. So we're going to talk about some impactful strategies. And so, we've talked a lot and about a whole lot of things, but, we've said a lot of things, but where does support start, right? So I had the signs of distress. I know that, we have this common language, but man, I'm worried about, my child. Where do we go? So let's talk about what can we do? I want us to think about this in kind of five areas. And when I do this presentation to departments, to programs, to schools, to parents, I'm really looking at these 5 things. We need to create safe spaces, right? Safe for you physically, emotionally, and spiritually, right? Bring who you are, where you are. We're going to meet you where you are, right? We want to make sure that we are promoting wellness, right? We know the power of sleep. Like, we know this. I had this conversation with my children yesterday. We know the importance of taking care of ourselves, eating a balanced diet, exercising, having engagement opportunities, right? This fuels our body physically. It fuels us mentally, right? We also, and this can be hard as a parent. We have to work to avoid assumptions, especially when it comes to grades and performance. We have courses here where, the common grade on a single test is a 30. And students are like, I didn't even know a grade, you could get a 30 out of 100. Like, that's a real grade. Yeah, it is. And that is scary and shocking. But, if we dig deep into that, like, that's what everybody got, right? This isn't a sign that you didn't do what you needed or you didn't do a good job. It just means that this is what you got on this class. Now we've got to find get more answers, right? So we want to make sure that we get that context. We always ask for the context when we can. We also want to make sure that we're asking direct questions and not making assumptions around support systems. Where I've seen, students struggle is, we make the assumption that there's a supportive relationship with their roommate, or, with maybe their advisor, and it turns out that that's not their supportive person. So again, we want to make sure that we're asking for that context. All these things that we talked about before, we need to be authentic. And I really hit this hollow with my university colleagues that we've got to provide transparency. We've got to be strength-based. We need to be patient, and authentic. And then, we want to make sure that we engage in trauma-informed approaches, that we're framing our questions, not, what's happened to you, what's wrong with you, but what's happened. We utilize active listening whenever we can, that we recognize, of course, that, that our kids are the experts of their lives, right? And we have certainly taken them, to this point, but we want to make sure that we save space for them to be experts in their lives, even when things aren't going perfectly, because then we're giving them the autonomy and the ability to build and learn from this, so they'll have that information for the future. And then, the best thing that we can do is be engaged, is to really be engaged. So, I do training. Oh, okay. So let's do this poll. Are you comfortable with active listening? So yes, no, undecided. Tell me what your thoughts are about active listening. All right, look at that. Okay. So, when I do trainings on active listening, I looked up online, like listening. And so I wanted to look at what pictures come up. These are the pictures that come up on Google for listening, right? In all of these pictures, there is only one picture that is two people sitting down talking, right? Which tells you a lot about listening, where we are today, right? Listening, we may both be in the same place and listening to something else. That doesn't mean that we are actively engaged with one another. Listening, we see, everyone walking around with headphones and using online technology like we are today. You may be on your phone listening with earpods right now. But, these pictures are really interesting for the fact of all of these and only one where they're really engaged in an interpersonal face-to-face relationship or conversation. When we're talking about active listening, I want us to look at, these are the main, the key points of active listening. So the first thing is, to engage in active listening is that we need to be focused in the moment and operate from a place of respect. So when I'm talking about like pay attention, it doesn't mean like I am not, I'm on my phone and I'm not paying attention, but we really need to be focused in this moment. Sometimes as parents, or even providers, right? Especially providers, like I am listening, but I'm also thinking about how to solve this problem. But that's not what active listening is. Active listening is I am in this moment and I am listening to you in this moment and what you are sharing in this moment. We want to make sure that as we're operating out of a place of respect, that also means that we are withholding judgment, right? And withholding judgment not meaning that in the, I'm going to fix this or you're wrong or right or whatever, but I am literally just being an open mind. I am literally just being open right now. That's it. And not making the assumption of that what someone means. We use this strategy of reflecting, right? Making sure that we are saying the words back. We are mirroring those words to ensure that we are hearing those things correctly. And then we're asking for clarification. You know, can you tell me more about what you're saying? Sometimes this can be hard because sometimes our children will shut down and they'll want to give one-word answers. And so we want to make sure that we're using that reflective skill so that we can keep them engaged and allow for deeper conversation. You know, the speaker solutions and needs, you know, I always tease when I train this, like this is like the key to healthy and happy marriages of in not making the assumption that I can or that I'm asking you to solve my problem. I'm married to a clinical psychologist, so sometimes I'll say like, I need my husband, not the clinical psychologist to come here. But saying, what do you need? How would you imagine this to be fixed or resolved? How can this be different for you? That's very different than, what do you want me to do to fix it? Right? What do you want me to do to fix it? We're not asking that. When we're active listening, we're saying, what do you need or want? How can you imagine this different? This is where we allow skill development to come into place, right? How can this be different for you? That is, you're giving them, you're keeping them in the lead, not you taking the reins and taking it on, right? You know, we want to make sure that after that we are summarizing our understanding. And then we need to ask, so how would this move forward? What are these plans? What are these next steps? Not making the assumption that you are taking this on, but what are those next steps? And making sure that there's an understanding, right? These skills can be really beneficial. Now, I understand as a parent and you know, if you have a child in crisis, that these things, you know, may feel like they go out the door. But we want to make sure that we are in the moment, that we want to make sure that we're asking those questions to ensure that you're getting what their needs are, right? We want to make sure that we're saying, what do you need, right? And then that you all have an understanding of how to move forward. Yes, these skills will be beneficial to all. All right, so let's talk about resilience, because we talked about listening, or we talked about the challenges, we talked about creating an environment, we talked about listening. Let's talk about resilience. Resilience, this slide couldn't be better. Resilience, it's a big word, it has a big meaning, but it also has a big impact. I think we make a lot of assumptions about what resilience is. And let's kind of debunk a little bit about that. So what resilience is not, it's not dichotomous. It is not you're born with it or you're not. That would be really sad, right? And you know, so it is not a single strength or attribute. It's not an outcome. It's not a whole bootstrap of like, you know, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and you got this. It's not a bounce back after a traumatic event. It's not those things. That's not what resilience is. And resilience has become a sexy, trendy term. So I wanted to make sure that we're really clearing up what resilience isn't, because you may have heard it from these contexts, and then we'll talk about what resilience is. So resilience is a collection of internal and external protective factors. And they're not innate, right? So we can build resilience. We can build resilience within ourselves as a supportive person. We can help contribute to someone's resilient building. You know, looking at the external factors, what's that number one? Family coping, right? That is an external factor that you can play into, right? Cultural and spiritual connections, having a nurturing community environment, securing your basic needs. You know, for those that attended a Psych 101 class, going back to Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? What's the bottom line is basic needs. We can't talk about things at the top if our basic needs aren't met, right? We can't talk about how I'm feeling deep down inside if I don't have a place to live, if I don't have food or water, if I don't feel safe. So we've got to make sure those external factors and making sure that those things are met, are building our resiliency. Our internal factors, right? Our beliefs, our problem-solving skills, our self-motivation, our intellectual functioning, our own self-views, and relationship building skills. Now, these are skills, right? You look at these, a lot of these have skills right behind them. These are things that can be learned, which means if they can be learned, that means that we can build resilience, right? As a clinical social worker, obviously I drank the Kool-Aid of therapy and I think it tastes oh so sweet. And I recognize that. Not everyone feels that way. But we can go into therapy and ask for what we want. We can say, Kimberly, I want skills. I need skills to help build my resiliency. And your clinician will help you build these, right? That's why I said with this generation doing, psychodynamic therapy, isn't always the strategy that's most helpful. But if we're using a cognitive behavioral approach or a strength or solutions focused approach, these are really great great interventions that can help build those skills that will then build up resiliency. So what is resiliency? So it is a dynamic developmental process resulting in healthy, adaptive, despite adversity, right? So we know that. So we want to make sure that in this process that it involves, exchanges between the student and their personal characteristics and the resources that are around them, okay? So because a traumatic experience has come up, it does not mean that students cannot move past it, but it means that we've got to build support and build resources around them, okay? So we want to make sure that, that we recognize this, okay? So this is what resiliency is. So how do we build this within an individual, right? We build it through family, through peer support, through building their confidence, their self-efficacy, their self-esteem, feeling connectedness in their community. This may mean their community back home. This may mean their university community. It may mean their academic community, right? And oftentimes spiritual belief can be another way of building resilience. I encourage you to look at this yourself and think about your own resiliency. And, is there something that you can do? Is there an area that you can help build up? So these are kind of the inner circle wheel. There is not one part that's more important than another. I will say that if a student is struggling with their health at a university, when we're talking about community connectedness, it's really important for them to have someone at the school that they can talk with, that they can be candid with, that they can be open with, whether that is a faculty member, whether that is an administrator or a school counselor or advisor, but having someone that can be their person, right? Is really important. Not relying on only their peers, but having that in their network is really important. And a lot of schools will have programs to help build those connections between students and faculty. We have a program called Flunch where we pay for the students and the faculty to have lunch together. So then there's not that really weird, awkward, like when the bill comes, like I'm a student, I don't have any money. You're a faculty member, you probably have money, but I asked you to eat. So like who pays? and then it just gets weird. So here we just pay for everybody and just have fun and talk. A lot of schools have different programs like that where students can build relationships with faculty, and learn about their path and learn about their experience, and help break down some of those barriers that we assume that because you got your PhD in this area that you didn't have struggles, right? So really encourage your student to build that community connectedness within their university. So the other thing I want to talk about is kind of the key tenets of an impactful time away. Doing this work a long time, and these are really the four main tenets of an impactful time away. Is one is prioritize treatment. If we don't prioritize treatment and engage and reflect on the challenges that we experienced in that semester, we will repeat it when we come back. All universities are systems, right? They're going to keep on churning. Whether I'm there, this student or that student is there, they're going to keep on going. If we don't fully address through treatment what happened, then we're going to repeat it when we come back, right? So as we're engaged in treatment, we want to make sure that we have a plan, where if we start to experience these challenges again, when I come back, what can I do? What strategies? Reminding us of the skills, those tools that we put in our tool belt throughout our time away, that we'll be able to pull those out and have that written in our plan. Number 2 is rest and recuperation. I can't stress this enough. During our time away, we want to make sure that students get back to like sleeping normal hours, when it's dark out, that they're eating 3 meals a day, that they're exercising regularly, that they have this routine. This is so vital to our physical recuperation. So we want to make sure that we're giving that opportunity. This is likely a student's first time of really taking time away, and having a break. And so we want to make sure that they do that, but that we also make sure that there is a consistent routine, because that will be really helpful for their transition back. The third piece is engaging with hobbies or passion areas. This one is usually like, really, Kimberly? It is, because our hobbies and our passion areas, that is what fuels our soul. And we need to do that during our time away. Sometimes it's learning new hobbies. Sometimes it's re-engaging with old hobbies. Sometimes it's breaking into those passion areas that were really important to us, and figuring out what it is. What happens is when we engage with those passion areas, it helps build our motivation. If our motivation goes up, then our confidence goes up. If our confidence goes up, that goes right back into building on our resiliency. It's a really beautiful cycle that can start with something that you enjoy. I have some students that will take this as an opportunity to go and read novels that they read when they were in middle school. Like, I can't tell you how many students I have right now rereading Harry Potter. I tease them that I'm going to start a book group where we all read it together. But it is going back and, what did it feel like reading that for the first time and having some of that nostalgia? I have students that are writing screenplays and books. I have students that are doing startups and apps. I have students that are gardening and knitting. There isn't a wrong answer as to what it is. It is doing that and fueling it within you. And then what we need to do is, when it comes time for you to come back, how can we build these, soul feeding activities into your regular schedule? So when the pressure is turned up with academics and stress and social engagements and navigating life as a, can we go back to the slide, please? As we turn up that pressure, then we want to make sure that we have that opportunity to have those items that are fueling us, that are keeping up that motivation, that self-confidence. So that number 3 is really important. Number 4 is productivity. And usually this happens towards the end of a time away. And I can't tell you, it doesn't matter if it is a full-time job, part-time job, an internship, a fellowship, volunteering, working at Target, at McDonald's, it doesn't matter what it is. The key in this productivity is that the student is held accountable for their time outside of their family. So by someone outside their family, and that they have the ability to be productive. So they can end a shift doing whatever, knowing that they contributed, that they showed up on time, that they followed through with what they needed. If students take a time away, follow these steps, it is much more likely that they will have a very smooth transition when they come back. So let's talk about, how do we know when a student is ready to come back? The goal is clinical progress, not time. And I think this is where universities across the country have gotten their policies wrong. And this is not a value statement, it's a factual statement. Time does not heal all wounds, right? We know that. So it's the same in readiness to return to school. Time is just time sometimes. So we really want the goal for a time away to be about clinical progress. Coming back when you are ready to return, right? Now, there's also a difference between a readiness and excitement, right? Excitement is, I can't wait to be back to hang with my friends. I can't wait to be on the plaza and, we're going to watch the game together. I can't wait to go camping in Kville. I can't wait for all of those things. That's excitement. A readiness is, I am academically ready to take on the 4 classes that I need and be healthy while I do it, which means sleeping regularly, eating consistently, maintaining communication, right? So I always talk with students about the difference between excitement. Excitement is good, but excitement is not readiness. And so making sure that we're having that conversation. Consistency with documentation requirements, did they meet treatment recommendations? Having a clear plan to return after discussing what didn't work last time, right? So we talked about that before. What didn't work? And then how do we have a clear plan now? What resources? And then making sure that we're having a discussion about not just health, but about academics, about social engagement, about their personal support services that are available, putting all of this together in a return plan. It doesn't have to be long and involved, but it needs to be in one place and it needs to be written. So that way families and the youth will be able to reference it, right? It's not real if it's not written down. And so we can't reference it later without that. Susan, did we have some questions?
Well, we are back to me for a moment. I'll let you get a drink of water and catch your breath a little bit. That was amazing. And I have to say that, Duke sounds incredible, and whatever you contribute to that is like way above beyond. But even if other schools are doing like half of this, then that is so much more of an investment in the students than we have seen in our experience, over the past 20 years or whatever. So it's really, really encouraging that schools are being a lot more, honestly, humane is really what it comes down to, and trying to position kids for success. So I think that that's amazing. So thank you. All right, everybody, let's do another temperature taking with a poll of how confident are you in supporting your teen's mental health at college? Very confident, confident, somewhat confident, slightly confident, or not confident. And while you're doing that, let me go ahead and tell you a couple of things. Please do complete the survey. You see the link here. I think it goes out in an email to you as well. Your feedback really matters to us. It helps us provide programming that's useful to you. And for those who enter, I'm sorry, for those who complete the survey, we'll drop your name in a bucket, and you'll be entered to win a copy of the College Wellness Guide by Casey Rowley Barneson. I would very much like to extend our appreciation to Kimberly Blackshear for her amazing job with this. There's so many things that caregivers and parents are walking away with, and I'm very excited for that. But also, in addition, there are several organizations that generously provide support for our youth and young adult programs. Those include the George Harrington Trust, the Middlesex Savings Charitable Foundation, the Jane B. Cook 1992 Charitable Trust, the Rebecca Pomeroy Foundation, the Bennett Family Foundation, the Thomas Anthony Pappas Charitable Foundation, the John Donnelly Trust, and the Massachusetts Department of Public Health Suicide Prevention Program. We are grateful. Thank you so much. Also, you should know that individual and family donors are vital to our ability to bring you the programs and information that help you as a caregiver. So if this webinar has helped you at all, please do consider making a donation at familyware.org. All right, here we are. And since it's just question and answers, I suppose I can stop sharing my screen, but it looks like everybody moved up a bit. So thank you so much. We're at 13% are very confident, 48% are confident, 35% are somewhat confident, and 4% are slightly confident. Excellent. Thank you all so much. All right, stop share. I can do that. Here we are. All right, got a few questions for you. Here we go. How does the family support the college student with treatment when they're not given any information after student is in college? This is a variation on the question that we always get. My kid has turned 18. What do I do now?
Yeah, great question. This is where, as a university, we are governed by FERPA, right? So by FERPA, it means by law, I cannot disclose any information about a student without their permission unless there is a health and safety issue, right? This is when, the university having a conversation with your child to get a release, so the university and you can talk is important. This is also where you can say, can I join a meeting with you, right? You are driving and that's fine, right? But what I would like to do is to make sure that I'm taking notes so we're on the same page about supports. I have these two questions. Is it okay for me to ask a couple things? I found that it's helpful that I write questions down before meetings. Like, so do you have questions that you want to make sure that we cover? Sometimes I get so excited, I forget about what the questions are, and it can be hard to get people back on the call. So, can we do that? And then, but know that if there is a safety issue, communicate to the school. Okay, because we are operating with the assumption that they are adults and their needs are getting met. If we don't know there's an issue, then we can't be proactive, right? So use that case management support, use those emergency supports, use the on-call line if you are concerned, to make sure that the university can respond. Also know that if there is an emergency, the university will contact you. They will, unless a student puts a FERPA block. It is very rare, and students don't know about FERPA blocks unless they ask about them. But that's really it. But I would really encourage you. A lot of the services that we talked about are available in most schools. Like I said, they may come with cute other names. Spend time on the Student Affairs website. If you don't know, call the Dean of Students office. Every university has to have a Dean of Students. Call their office and say, walk me through it. Also, a lot of schools will have parent handbooks. Take a look at the parent handbook. There are usually 1 or 2 sentence blurbs about each program, and use those. Those will be really helpful.
Someone asked, what language might they use to help their student recognize that he should approach student disability services independently and to use accommodations that he used in high school, the kid is embarrassed and doesn't really want to do that.
Get this all the time. I usually say, if somebody needs glasses, does this mean they shouldn't use them when they're taking their math test? And they're like, that's dumb. Of course you should use your glasses. How is it different? How is it different, right? A lot of students will say, well, it seems like I'm getting a leg up from other people, or I'm getting treated differently. Really, accommodations are about evening the playing field. That's what it is. But it goes to, I understand, man. I get it. I get it, that it makes you feel different. Why don't we get them in place and you choose whether or not to use them, right? Let's take the time now. You know, disability offices work over the summer. So if you are on the quarter system, get it done now before school start, right? The brilliant part is if your university has an accommodation system and your child has accommodations, those accommodations, if they choose to do a study abroad, can then be used from one school to the next. And you don't have to redo the paperwork. Whoop, whoop, one time. Yes, I like that. Also, if your child takes classes at a summer school, right? So, you know, they're going off to California to do school full time, but over the summer they come back home to Connecticut and, you know, going to take classes at UConn. Cool. So then they can use those accommodations there for their summer classes too, right? So this can be really impactful. Now, what I tell students is, why not have a conversation? Call the access office and just talk to them. If you don't have a good vibe, that's fine. But why not invest in yourself and have a call? Now, sometimes I will join those calls with students if we have a pre-existing relationship where they're like, Kimberly, like, these people don't know me. They don't know my business. You know my business. Help me. And so you can ask that case management office, if they're working with your child, you know, they can join those calls too. And it's really about having whoever in the room so the student feels comfortable so they can get what they need.
I think this is more about reassurance or maybe developing a strategy, but any guidance for parents whose only child is going away to college? And it might even be whose first child is going, you know, I think it could play either way.
Absolutely. You know, I think we've got to normalize, right? That sending your kid to college is scary and uncomfortable, right? But also exciting. You know, we don't spend enough time talking about as humans that emotions are complex and you can feel more than one thing at once, right? We usually like, are you blah? And it's like just one line. But the reality is that we are complex. And so it's really important for us to first just acknowledge what we're feeling, right? And then we have to also take in the facts, right? And allow the facts to be our reassurance. Our child is excited about going to school. They're going to have a better life by completing their university education, right? Like they're going to have more jobs available to them. Awesome. This is what you plan for and what they've been working for. Wonderful. That there will be times where it's lonely with your child being gone, and that's normal. And so it's going to be important for you to go back to that list of building resiliency, right? Of building your social connectedness, right? To engaging with your community, to building those things, right? We also want to make sure that you guys do talk about what the communication expectations are for both of you, for you both to feel comfortable, because you may be expressing your concern and anxiousness, and they may not. But if you're able to say, hey, let's come up with something that feels good to you and me, and let's see. And we may have to readjust, and that's fine. You know, you may end up with study group on Sunday night. Hopefully study group on Sunday night. But you know, that's okay if we need to make those adjustments. So Acknowledge those feelings, use those things that we talked about before to build your resilience, and then have a good communication plan. Talk through fall break, talk through Thanksgiving plans, talk through winter break, right? The more transparent, the better. And recognizing that, things will ebb and flow through the semester and how you're feeling and they're feeling, and that's completely normal.
This one is an easy one, I think. What if the university or school doesn't offer tuition insurance? Didn't you say there was a national option?
Yeah, you can go through a third-party vendor. Even if your university offers tuition insurance, you don't have to go through them. You can go by somebody else. Usually with tuition insurance, for you to qualify for that time away account, it is something that is diagnosable, right? So it could be anything in the DSM-5, right? Some policies, you want to make sure you look at your policies. Some policies require hospitalization, some don't. I would suggest getting one that doesn't require hospitalization. Right. We want to make sure that that what those documentation expectations are. Okay. So ask them. A lot of them, you have the ability to look at the stuff online, but you can also call and talk to people. Likely your university is not going to know the details. The vendor who has the tuition insurance will be able to walk you through the details.
Okay. We're running out of time here. I think there are a couple that tie together. Because one is asking about how to talk with your kid about the importance of sticking to their treatment plan and checking in with themselves. And the other is when they stop using the strategies that they've been taught for organization, time management, and overall independence. I mean, I think they tie together into one question about like your kid needs to have a plan and a backup plan.
Absolutely. I like to think about, when I talk about time away, I like to think about like a carpenter cannot build a house with just hammer and nails. Like you can't, like you need hammer and nails. They're important, but it takes far more tools than that. And I like to think about your time away and your treatment plan as having as many tools in your tool belt as possible. So that way I try this one, it didn't work. Okay, I'm going to try another one. I'm going to try another one. When we're thinking about a treatment plan, we can't just say a treatment plan is medication management and go to therapy. That's too broad, right? So we've got to lean on those providers and say, what do we need? We need to lean with the student. And what do you need? How do we keep them engaged? How do we build those passion areas in? Build passion, build motivation, build follow through, right? Executive functioning is so funny. I was literally talking to my 11-year-old before I got on this call about the same thing, right? We need to, there are really great strategies for executive functioning, right? The challenge is a lot of them are technology based, and our kids spend all of their time evaluating all of them and then never pick one, right? Oftentimes there are student success or academic resource centers at your university. They pay for a lot of tools that are built, and the university has executive accounts. And so usually your student can tap right into it, but there will be a person that will help them use them, right? Encourage your student to use the resources at the university that you pay for. You're paying for all of it. You're going to keep paying for it whether they use it or not. So encourage them to use those, right? We want to stick with the basics when we're talking about executive functioning. We want to use our calendar as much as possible. That includes academic planning. So we want to make sure that they're using their calendar to plan out assignments, midterms, finals, all of that, so they can, I like to think of it as like planned anxiety. I know the third week of October, I have 4 papers, a project, and a midterm. So instead of freaking out the week before, I know it and I can plan ahead, right? Then you can integrate, family activities, breaks, all of that into that calendar. Their advisors, their academic advisors or their deans will have the tools and resources to help them build those things. That's not a Duke thing. That's an every university thing. Most of the things that we talked about, every university offers, they may call it something different. As parents, sometimes it's our call or the youth's call to ask the university and say, tell me what you offer for these things, right? Your dean of students office is always a great place to start, or an advising office is a good place to start.
All right, and I'm not sure if you can help with this one, but we'll give it a try. What about recommendations for those not going to college who are not sure what comes next?
Wonderful. Okay, so first we have to go back to that slide where we had those boxes on where do we start. We have to create a safe space. College isn't for everybody, and it may not be for everyone right now, and that's okay. There are a lot of really great programs, and I was talking to a student just yesterday about the same thing, right? So if you don't want to go, let's talk about what your passion areas are. Let's talk about what your hobbies are, right? And, there are ways that we can take an online non-credit class to kind of fill things, out. Spoke with another class or student this week where he's like, I can't come back to school. I got no confidence. I feel you, man. Let's talk about what we can do to build up your confidence, right? So some students feel like it's an ability thing. Some students feel like it's a just not my thing, and that's okay. So then let's start from not, college prep and up. Let's talk about, what do you want? How would you like to fill your time? But as parents, it's really important for us to create that space where they can feel comfortable talking. What I have found is when they end up finding something super awesome that will result in going to school later, and that's okay, right? But then they're going because they're motivated. You're spending your money on an education versus spending your money on convincing them to get an education, which is very different, right? And the pursuit of a degree is a beautiful process, right? But we've got to make sure that health comes first, right? And so having those very clear and transparent, yet supportive conversations, using those active listening skills of, don't want to go to school, let's talk through why. I've had more and more students say, I can't go to school, and it's not for interest, it's for financial concerns about if it's putting too much impact on their parents. Is this an assumption? Like, have you had this conversation with your parents? Like, let's have that, right? So I just encourage as much open and honest conversation and starting where they are. And it's likely you guys may be really close together and not realize it.
Well, that is amazing. And we're just going to wrap up. And I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions, but we came close. Thank you again. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Please do complete the survey. I think we just put the link in the chat, make it easy for you to click on it. Again, you'll be entered to win a copy of this college wellness guide. Make a family action plan and visit our website. You'll learn more. You can volunteer. You can have your kids who are having time away volunteer.
Yes.
And we would also, invite your donation. Kimberly, thank you so much for your time and your expertise. And thank you to everyone for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. And we look forward to seeing your feedback on our survey. Thank you and good night.